That number is going to change your life. Not because of what you can buy with it, not because it makes you rich, not because it means you've figured it out. It changes your life because of what it costs to get there. And nobody, not your bank, not your parents, not the finance influencers with the Lamborghinis, nobody tells you what it actually takes. They tell you to save more. They tell you to invest early. They tell you compound interest is a miracle. And all of that is true, but here's what they don't tell you. The first $100,000 is not a financial milestone. It's a psychological war, and most people lose it, not because they ran out of money, but because they ran out of reasons to keep going. This video is about what that war actually looks like from the inside. Stay with me, because somewhere in this video is the exact moment you'll recognize yourself. And when you do, everything changes. And I'll tell you this right now. There's one decision, one single moment that separates the people who reach $100,000 from the people who spend their entire lives circling it. We'll get to it, but first, you have to understand where it starts. You are 22 years old. Your account balance is $847. Not your savings, your balance. Everything you have combined in one number, $847. You don't tell anyone this number. You don't talk about money. Nobody at your level does. But everyone at your level is doing the same silent math. You check your banking app more than your messages. You know your account number by heart. You calculate your groceries before you get to the register. You put the name brand cereal back. You get the store brand. You split a streaming subscription with someone you don't particularly like anymore because canceling feels like falling behind. This is what zero feels like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a low, constant hum of arithmetic running underneath everything you do. And the thing nobody tells you about zero is this. At zero, money is not a tool. Money is the air. You don't think about optimizing it. You think about breathing. You get your first real job. The salary sounds decent until you do the math after tax. You move into an apartment that takes exactly 43% of your take-home. You own a car with 4 years left on the loan. You made it in a spreadsheet at 11 p.m. on a Sunday with a sense of quiet determination. It worked perfectly in the spreadsheet. In real life, the car needs new tires in month 2. The budget breaks. You rebuild it. The car needs something else in month 4. This is the first lesson nobody teaches you. Expenses don't wait for your budget. Life doesn't care about your plan. And at zero, every setback feels like a reset. Every unexpected bill doesn't just cost money. It costs momentum. It costs belief. And belief is the only real currency at this level. You save your first $1,000. You don't celebrate. It doesn't feel like enough to celebrate, but something shifts, quietly, structurally, in the way you think about money. Because for the first time, a number moved in the right direction because of a decision you made. Not a lucky break, not a gift, a decision. You stop buying coffee 3 times a week. You cook at home 5 nights instead of 2. You decline a weekend trip you couldn't afford anyway and felt guilty about declining. And the $1,000 sits there. You move $200 of it to savings. Then you move it back 3 days later when the electricity bill comes in higher than expected. But then you put it back again. And this cycle, save, dip, rebuild, save again, this is the actual work nobody talks about. Not the investment strategy, not the asset allocation, the cycle. The grinding, repetitive, unglamorous cycle of choosing the account over the impulse, over and over and over again. The first $1,000 doesn't change your financial life. It changes your financial identity. You start to become someone who saves. That identity, not the money, is what gets you to $100,000. This is where most people stall. Not at zero. Zero has urgency. Zero has fear. Fear is a powerful motivator. The danger zone is $3,000, $5,000, $7,000. Enough to feel safe, not enough to feel free. At $5,000, something dangerous happens. The anxiety lifts slightly. The constant low hum of financial stress quietens just enough for lifestyle to creep in. You upgrade the apartment, just a little. You start eating out more, just casually. You buy the better phone. You deserved it. You worked hard. And none of these decisions feel wrong in isolation. Every single one of them makes sense on its own. But what nobody tells you is that lifestyle inflation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send a warning. It moves in slowly, like rising water, and by the time you notice, you're treading to stay at the same level you were before the raise. You get a promotion, $8,000 more per year. It lands as $512 extra per month after tax. You felt wealthy for approximately one afternoon. And this is the mechanical trap of the danger zone. Income rises, lifestyle rises with it, the gap between the two never widens, and the savings number barely moves. The people who escape this zone don't earn more. They decide that the gap between what they earn and what they spend is sacred. They protect that gap the way other people protect their weekend plans. Aggressively, personally, without apology. You cross $10,000 for the first time. You are 25, maybe 26, maybe 28. It doesn't matter. You've never had 5 figures before, not once in your adult life. You check the balance constantly for the first week, not out of anxiety, out of disbelief. The psychological weight of $10,000 when you've never had it is completely disproportionate to the actual number. It's not life-changing money, you know that, but it feels like you've crossed into a different category of person, but you feel it. And that feeling matters more than most people admit, because at $10,000, 2 things happen simultaneously. Not self-help, not motivation, actual books about how money works. You learn what an index fund is. You open a brokerage account and stare at it for 2 weeks before putting anything in. You invest $1,500. The market drops 4% the next day. You feel physically sick. You almost pull it out. And that moment, that specific Tuesday afternoon when the market is red and your hands are hovering over the sell button and you don't press it, that is the moment. That is the decision I told you about at the beginning of this video. The moment you decide that fear doesn't run your financial decisions, you do. That single decision, held in that single moment, is worth more than any investment strategy you will ever read about. Second thing that happens at $10,000, the people around you start to feel different. Not them, you. You notice who talks about money and how. You notice who spends without thinking and who spends deliberately. You start to feel slightly out of step with conversations you used to be completely comfortable in. This is not arrogance. This is the beginning of a different relationship with money. This is the hardest stretch, not emotionally, mechanically, because at $10,000 to $50,000, the numbers are big enough to be meaningful, but the progress is slow enough to be discouraging. You are investing consistently. You are saving deliberately. You are doing everything right, and the number moves so slowly that some months it feels like it doesn't move at all. And the valley is where most journeys to $100,000 end, not in failure, but in distraction. People don't quit the plan. They just quietly stop executing it. Life fills the space. A relationship, a move, a career change. And 3 years later, they look at the account and realize the momentum broke somewhere they can't quite identify. What nobody tells you about the long middle is this. The work doesn't get harder, because the enemy at this stage is not poverty, boredom with the same lunch, boredom with declining the same invitations, boredom with watching a number that seems to move in millimeters when you want it to move in miles. The people who survive the valley are not more disciplined than the people who don't. They are more connected to the why. They have a reason that is bigger than the discomfort. Not, I want to be financially free someday. A specific, visceral, personal reason that they can see when they close their eyes at 11 p.m. on a Thursday when the account has barely moved in 3 months. Find that reason before you enter the valley, and when it does, the spreadsheet won't save you. You start to feel it before you understand it. Your investments return $2,200 in a single year, without you doing anything, just sitting there, compounding quietly. $2,200. That's almost 2 months of careful saving, just from the money doing its job. And for the first time, you understand compound interest not as a concept from a textbook, but as a physical sensation. The machine worked while you slept. At $50,000, you also start making different decisions about time. You stop doing things that don't compound. Every hour, every decision, every commitment gets filtered through a new question. Is this building something? Or is this just filling time? You start saying no to things that used to be automatic yeses. A destination event you can't afford without liquidating something. A social obligation that costs $400 and returns nothing. A A side project that a friend pitches that has no business model and no margin. No, no, no. The friction in the relationships is real.
You feel it. People notice the shift. Some of them call it being boring. Some of them call it being selfish. You stay quiet. You say no anyway, because what nobody tells you is this. The path to $100,000 is a social filtering process as much as a financial one. The people who distract you from the plan are not bad people. They're just on a different timeline. And eventually, quietly, the circles change. Not by design, by direction. The last stretch is the fastest. Not because the numbers get easier. Because you do. At $70,000, your monthly investment returns start to visibly contribute to the growth. The gap between saving your way to $100,000 and growing your way there starts to close. You are no longer just a saver. You are an investor. That is not a semantic difference. It is a complete identity shift. A saver protects what they have. An investor puts what they have to work. The saver watches the account balance. The investor watches the portfolio performance. At $85,000, you run the projections. You open a spreadsheet at midnight, not out of anxiety this time, out of precision. And you model the next 10 years with the assets you have and the contributions you're making. And the number at the end of that model is not the number you expected. It is bigger. Not slightly bigger. Significantly bigger. Because you can see now, really see, how the compounding curve bends upward in the later years. How the machine accelerates. How the work you are doing right now is building leverage you won't fully feel for another 5 years. And something settles in your chest. Not excitement. Something quieter than that. Certainty. It happens on a Wednesday. Nothing ceremonial about it. You check the account. The number has crossed 6 figures. $100,000. You sit with it for a moment. You thought you'd feel different. You thought there'd be something, a release, a celebration, a sense of having arrived somewhere. There's a quiet satisfaction. And then, almost immediately, clarity. Because $100,000 invested at a 7% average annual return generates $7,000 a year. That's not freedom. That's a foundation. And that is the final thing nobody tells you about your first $100,000. It doesn't end the journey. It starts it. Every dollar after $100,000 is easier than the one before it. The compounding accelerates. The identity is set. The habits are built. The fear is gone. The first $100,000 is hard not because the math is brutal, though the math is brutal, but because you are building a version of yourself that didn't exist before. More disciplined, more patient, more immune to the noise. And that version of yourself, the one forged in the saving and the sacrifice and the long, boring middle and the Tuesday you didn't sell, that version is worth more than the $100,000 in the account. Because money can be lost. But who you become on the way to $100,000, that compounds forever. Nobody makes a viral video about the boring parts.